episode 143. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to Alexa's Publishing Chat. I'm Alexa Bigwarf, your host, and I am really pleased, as usual, to welcome you to another episode. As we get closer to Thanksgiving, I think this is a super appropriate podcast episode to drop. I had the most fascinating interview with Sarah Elisabeth Sawyer, who is an author, but she's also a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. And we just had a great discussion about writing about Native American Indians and how do you, what are the appropriate words to use when you're writing about them. And I probably already messed that up because I think it's either American Indians or Native Americans, but not Native American Indians. So sorry, Sarah. I still have work to do in this as well. But we talk about all kinds of things. And honestly, she's got just incredible advice for you. And one of the things that we talked about, the question that I asked her was, is it okay to say Happy Thanksgiving? And I think you'll be interested in her response. So anyway, this is whether you are writing about Native Americans or not. I think it's a fascinating discussion hearing from somebody who is within a culture and a community and a group of people that may not represent you. It's a great conversation around the topic and may give you some ideas of questions to ask if you're writing about other groups that you are not a part of. So great interview. And I hope that you'll take the time to listen to it no matter what you're writing about. She's got a really good course that she offers as well. You can find all of the information in the show notes, which you can find over at thewomeninpublishingsummit.com/podcast and look for episode 143. Okay, before we get into the episode, I just want to remind you that tickets for the Women in Publishing Summit, which runs live virtually, so it's all on Zoom, you don't have to travel anywhere, in March, and it is March 5th through the 8th, are now on sale. They are $100 off right now, so please grab them before the price starts going up. It will go up by $50 by the end of the year, and so we really want you to grab these now and join us. We are already doing pre-conference bonus sessions, which you'll get access to the recordings as well, no matter when you join, or you can join us live at them. Yesterday, we did a great one on creating successful Kickstarter campaigns if you need help with funding your book project. And we've got a bunch of things coming up related to all kinds of different topics, which you'll be able to, we'll be sharing on our email list throughout it. So anyway, head on over to womeninpublishingsummit.com. You can't miss it. It's the main page over there. And also head over to the events page so you can see what we have going on. All right, enjoy the show. Welcome to the podcast, a place where you can come to get inspiration, motivation, help, encouragement, and support in your journey to write, publish, and sell your book. Hosted by Alexa Bigwarf. 'Cause I've been where you've been, and I felt what you're feeling, and I don't want to get in your way. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Alexa's Publishing Chat. I'm really pleased to bring you Sarah Elisabeth Sawyer today for what I think will be a very interesting conversation, one we have never covered on the podcast, on the blog, at the Women in Publishing Summit, or any of the things. So hang on to your hats, because I think you will maybe never heard this discussed at all. We are going to be talking, because I know you're like, what are we talking about? We are going to be talking about how to write about Native Americans in your fiction. So let me tell you all about Sarah. Now, do you go by Sarah Elisabeth, or is that just your full name?
That's just my full name. Just Sarah's fine.
Okay, so let me tell you about Sarah. So fiction authors who want to write about Native Americans face a challenging minefield riddled with do's and don'ts and no clear answers. That is why author and writing instructor Sarah Elisabeth Sawyer created the Fiction Writing American Indians digital course. As a tribal member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, she has written and published 17 historical fiction books with Native main characters and over 275 nonfiction articles on Native artists and organizations with representatives from dozens of North American tribes. The Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian honored her as a literary artist through their Artist Leadership Program for her work in preserving Choctaw Trail of Tears stories, and she is a First Peoples Fund artist and business leadership alumni. Through her in-depth course, authors are equipped to write authentic stories that honor First American history and culture, and you can get that at fictioncourses.com/American Indians. And we'll have that link and all of the show notes and everything over at the podcast page at womenandpublishingsummit.com/podcast. Look for this interview and you'll find all the notes. So thank you very much for coming to talk about this topic.
Oh, thank you for having me on, Alexa. It's a pleasure to be here. As we say in Choctaw, halito, hello, and yakoki, thank you.
I love that. Well, this is one of those topics that has come up quite a bit in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, I would guess, as we've seen, not always with the Native American discussion, but around how to write about somebody you are not that person, you are not of that background, ethnicity, race, any of those things. And, we saw big scandals like with the American Dirt. I'm sure there have been situations similar with writings on Native Americans, but I think it's really important for people, especially in the United States. There's a good chance if you're writing something, you may have the opportunity to include or not include Native Americans in your stories, right? So, if you're going to be writing about people that are not representative of that group, then you should know how to do it well. And I guess that would be my first question. Well, first question, am I referring correctly by saying Native Americans? Because I heard someone else say that now some people are saying as a group, they prefer to be referred to as Indigenous people. So I don't know what the right one is.
It's hard to keep track, Alexa. I mean, honestly, I spend 45 minutes, just the first 45 minutes of my course, talking about terminology because it's so confusing. Everyone has a different opinion. You can ask people within the community and you're going to get different answers. So I chose to call my course Fiction Writing American Indians, and I went with the term American Indian because that's still by and large the preferred term within Native communities. So especially with elders. And some of them actually get a little vehement about that. They grew up as American Indians and they want to keep that. One Choctaw elder told me, she's like, with all of these changing terminologies, it feels like we don't know who we are anymore. So it's definitely a topic that we need to address and put out there. But again, you're going to get different opinions. The term Native American came out of primarily academia. And so really it was more college professors putting that term on there. So you will have a lot of the younger Native people who go with the term Native American because they mostly, many of them learned about their culture through Native American studies in college. So that's also considered the politically correct term. But like I said, a lot of elders and people who are in the government positions and in places like the National Museum of the American Indian, that was, it was debated about, do we call it Native American, American Indian? And they chose to go with American Indian. And that's through the Smithsonian Institution. So beautiful museum, by the way, out in DC. The other term that we're really liking right now is First American. So there's the First American Museum in Oklahoma now, and really appreciate that. That's actually the official term that the Chickasaw Nation uses, is First American. So that's what they use on all of their materials when referring to a group of, and Indigenous is fine as well. And you'll hear me say Native and Indigenous when I'm talking about, just the individuals like that, or the people as a whole. And I did that with the organization that I used to write for. That was the terms that they used. And it's better than just saying Indian. That is still considered a derogatory term within Indian country and among Native people. It's perfectly fine for them to use. If you're coming from the outside, it's something that you need to be aware of, that it's used in the right situations and in the right ways because it has been used as a derogatory term. If you're writing historical fiction, that's really the term you're going to be using is Indian. I'll wrap up that with saying, because there's a lot more on terminology, and I appreciate you asking that first off, with just saying the most correct way to refer to someone is by their tribal affiliation. So I
Mm.
typically don't say I'm Native American or I'm American Indian. I just say I'm Choctaw. And so that's the best way when you're writing and doing your characters. Occasionally you'll need to refer as a whole, as a people group or an ethnic or a race, but in general, if you're referring to an individual character, you would just use their tribal affiliation.
The whole conversation is so interesting because I feel like the politically correct people have basically been beating us over the head about not to use the word Indian. So I
Mhm.
actually found it fascinating that the first thing out of your mouth was American Indian is the way to go. And it just boy, it brings up so many conversations that we could have that have nothing to do with writing about uh first Americans, which I love that as well. But the political stuff behind it and who's making up these things and
Mhm.
deciding, what's right and what's wrong. And it I think it just goes back to what I'm sure we're going to talk about more of, is going directly to the source and getting the information directly from them rather than listening to what a professor who has no connection whatsoever to any first American tribe and is telling us what and how to say. So thank you for setting the record straight on that.
Mhm. Absolutely.
So okay, then the next question is on that topic actually. Is this something that people the people in the Native American or first Americans community get upset about when other people that aren't of the community write about it, or does it matter on how well you do it justice?
Ooh, as far as like including American Indian characters in their
Hmm.
stories and you're
Hmm.
not American Indian, that again, you're going to get really broad
Hmm.
responses on that. For me, ultimately, I'll just go ahead and distill it down. And I usually end with this, but I'll just distill this down. I believe writers, we as authors, should be judged based on the quality of our writing and not on our race. And that's
Yes.
something that, it is unfortunate. There have been so many stereotypes and abuses that have come honestly from writers and the writing community with American Indians. So going back hundreds of years, dime novels and just the romanticizing or the savagery, all of those things were largely perpetuated by writers. So we do have a great responsibility to do our work and to do it well and to avoid those stereotypes and to do really quality writing when it comes to including American Indian characters. I think it does require a lot of caution, a lot of awareness, really being aware of what you're doing and why you're making those choices. At the same time, for those who don't want writers to include American Indian characters or even just other ethnic groups, talking in a broader sense, with all writers writing, different ethnicities or disabilities or, things that you haven't personally experienced. If you leave those characters out, say you leave American Indians out, you're now leaving them out of the narrative. You're leaving them out of history. You're leaving them out of today's culture if you're writing contemporary. And so I think that's the danger that we're in right now is authors are being told not to write about things that they haven't experienced, but yet if we leave those things out, they're not being represented in the stories. So your story is being populated by only people that are you, that are your experiences and your backgrounds. And I just think there's, we went from in historical times where American Indians were left out of the stories and then they were being included in the stories and now they're being left out again. So there are some authors, some natives who are like, we want you to write about us. We want it written in a good way though. And then of course you will meet those that are like, let us tell our stories, and those are stories for us to tell. And there's absolutely, I teach a lot of native authors, and I want to see more of that. I want to see us
Yeah.
telling our stories, but at the same time, I am not looking to exclude anyone from writing about our stories as long as they're willing to take that care and attention when they do that.
It's so interesting because well, it's interesting and also very, very sad, I would say. And that is that when we're talking about writing stories, especially from the perspective of America, anything happening in America, there is an opportunity to include information on the first Americans, depending on what's happening. But like in South Carolina, here's where I'm going with this rambling statement. In South Carolina, you would hardly know it because we don't see a lot of the information. We don't now things are named Cherokee and Santee and these names, but you don't really recognize that that's a connection to it because we don't talk about it. But there are a ton of tribes in South Carolina just itself. I was trying to look up to see if I could find the actual number. Um, but there's a lot of them here. And so what I'm saying is like it's very interesting whenever we look at even writing stuff set in our own communities, how sometimes we're not even getting the full picture of our communities and how interesting that might be to add that perspective in there. Um,
Yeah.
Depending on what type of writing you're doing, obviously,
Mhm.
that's going to matter. But if I decided I'm going to write about something that would have happened, I mean, just down the road, we have Shira and all these places where there was influence. Would it be acceptable to reach out to and is it okay? Can we still refer to them as tribes? Is that it's still
Mhm.
yeah,
That
okay.
that is the term. In fact, I was going to
Okay.
say, and how many is in South Carolina? I don't know that particular state, but there's nearly 600
Mm.
federally recognized tribes in the United States.
There's
So,
at least 9 in South Carolina, if not
mhm,
more than that. I want to say at one point in time I had heard something like 40, but that just seems so like such a large number for such a small state, but
mhm.
it
I
could
wouldn't be
be.
surprised. I wouldn't be
Um,
surprised. Yeah.
but if I decided I wanted to do something or work that included them, would it be acceptable to reach out to members of that tribe and ask to interview them or come?
Mhm.
I don't even know what you would ask.
Yeah, that's such a great question. That's what I love to teach authors is how to approach the tribes, because that is going to be, to me, your best and most respectful way of approaching it. That said, there's a lot to that. One, authors and writers, writers do approach tribes, and they have for decades, for hundreds of years, and like, hey, tell us your story, tell us about this, tell us about that. And what you will find pretty common, this is what I've heard over and over, and what I experienced even myself, is tribes are very cautious about working with writers because so much has been
Yeah.
taken from the communities and abused and misused. So they are very cautious if you are an author, if you are a writer. That said, what I encourage authors to do is first do your initial research. Do your
Mhm.
research as much as you can into the tribe. Go to their website, go to their cultural center if they have one, go to anything that the tribe has put out, which not all tribes have. That's very, been very sparse in terms of funding and support for a lot of programs. But with my interviews that I've done, I know a lot of tribes are really working to preserve their language, to tell their story, and to put that out there. So you start there, gather as whatever the tribe has put out, start there and get that, and use that as a basis for creating your questions. That way, when you're coming in, they're not like, well, we've already put that out there, or this is totally, off track from what we believe as a people. One example of that is the Choctaw Nation, and we're the third largest tribe, and our cultural center just opened in 2021. So a lot of tribes, just haven't been able to put much out there. But one example of that is if you go online and you research Choctaws and maybe like spiritual beliefs, it'll come up that Choctaws were sun worshipers,
Mm.
and that is still being perpetuated to this day.
Oh, and it's not
So
true.
no,
Oh.
not according to our elders. So I spoke to one of our elders who is Mississippi Choctaw, which they were the ones who remained in the homelands versus the Choctaws who removed during the Trail of Tears and became the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. So there's the Mississippi Band of Choctaws, which are very most deeply connected and rooted to our original culture, pre-contact culture. And according to that Choctaw elder, he said that, when the missionaries, and this is also confirmed in other sources, but he said when the missionaries came in and asked the Choctaws basically, do you believe in a supreme being? Do you have that? And, of course, the language barrier
Yeah,
was there, the
yeah.
language gap. And so they would point to the sun. And
Mm.
the missionaries recorded that down that they were sun worshipers. And there was also some potential connections with, a lot of the southern tribes, the Aztec and all. So they put down that they were sun worshipers. And what his story, that was passed down to him is that they believed the creator lived behind the sun, and the sun was
Oh.
his eye to view his creation and his children. So that became a misconception, and it is still written about in blogs and put out in media today that Choctaws were sun worshipers. So I was really grateful this year during the eclipse, the full eclipse that we had, and it went over the Choctaw Nation,
Oh,
and our historic preservation department put out a really thorough article about Choctaw's relationship to the sun and the beliefs and the ancient beliefs, and then bringing it forward to today. So it really dispelled a lot of those myths and misconceptions. So again, I just really encourage authors to go to the tribe, see what they've put out, and if there's not a lot on a particular thing, and just be aware that what you read online and you take it to the tribe, they may be like, "Oh yeah, yeah, we know about that." That's that's
that is
not
wrong.
yeah, we've been trying to correct that for about 150 years. So just going to the tribe and doing as much research as you can beforehand, and then really build a relationship if you can. Build some relationships with the historic department or cultural preservation versus just kind of going in and plopping down and saying, "Tell me everything about your people."
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Um, and on that, like, hopefully, if you're doing your research, you won't get it wrong. But this is actually a really, really great point on why it is important to go right to the source. Because if somebody just Googles Choctaw and there's that much information out there saying that they were sun worshipers, then I'm assuming there's a lot of misinformation about other tribes as well. So, what do you have any tips beyond going and interviewing and doing some initial research and then going in and asking your questions on what authors can do to make sure? And I would say this probably applies to any group that you're not like, but especially with this particular community to make sure they don't get it wrong and then create the upheaval and oh my gosh, can you believe this person wrote this and they're awful and burn the book and ban the book and all the
Oh,
things.
and authors are losing their publishing contracts over this, or they're just being
Oh,
blocked. They're being
right.
stonewalled even if they've done their research. I had one author who did go through my course, and so she was able to tell her editor, because her editor was like, "Oh, I don't know if you should, go there and include this, particular tribe she was doing." And she, said, "Hey, I did this course. I'm really, working hard at this and all." And so the editor, kind of gave her a pass on that. And that's, it's not a guarantee. I don't offer any
Right.
kind of certification with my program, but it is something that can play heavier into your favor. But to your question on what else authors can do, you can look up historical books that were written, in the 1800s. Google Books, I think, online, there's a lot of those old books that they've been digitized. And so there may be a particular book that, was written, before we had 20th century influences. So but you also want to balance that because they didn't get it all right. In fact, some
Right.
of it was pretty grossly wrong. So you can balance that with modern writings about the tribe and know it's probably going to land somewhere in between,
Mm.
from the historical perspective versus our modern perspective. And one of the ways you can find those old books too is find books that were written about the tribe you're wanting to explore and look in the bibliography. So check their sources and don't just rely on what's in the book, but go look at those sources. And that can be a way that you can find other perspectives, that the more that you have, and make note, try to keep your research organized, but the more sources that you have, and really seeing not just what confirms each other, like the sun worshipers, but what seems to be coming up, and just balancing the historical record with the modern day. If and then ultimately that's a good place to start, and then you can take some of that to the tribe to ask questions.
Perfect. So, there's a lot of stereotypes in this country about what happened with the first Americans, the whole thing. I mean, I watched the series 1874. Have you seen that?
I haven't. I'm familiar with it, but I haven't actually watched it yet.
I'd be curious. That one I felt like did a really, really good job at showing the connection between some of the original settlers and some of the first Americans, and not all bad, not all good, but some of the struggles with integration and if that's what you want to call it. Um
Assimilation is what we
as,
call it.
oh,
Assimilation.
assimilation. Okay. Or I mean, just even from, I don't know if assimilation is like what I mean when I'm
Oh,
saying like when the two communities got to
yes.
know each other, like
I got
that.
what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah,
integrating as a community.
exactly.
Yeah, that's a good term.
So we have the stereotypes that comes from that, and unfortunately, a lot of the stereotypes, you either have the really aggressive, cruel, scalping, stereotypes, or you have the like laid back, smoking the peyote, like
The
you know.
romanticized children of the forest.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's like, what are some of the lesser known stereotypes around Native Americans?
hmm Yeah, and that's how I usually categorize it, especially in historical terms. Is you either had the overly romanticized native
Hmm.
person who, yeah, just roamed the forest and hunter gatherer, and it was a utopia.
Yeah.
That's a on that extreme, it was just this utopia before the Europeans came, and there was no struggles, no issues, and our research has proven otherwise, even in the term of having warriors. And we have a game today, well, historical game, but they still play it today, called stickball. And in Choctaw, we call it the little brother of war, and it was a way of settling disputes without actually going to war. And some people
Oh.
did die during the game. It was much rougher than rugby or football, but it was stickball, and so it was known as little brother of war. And so you had warriors, you had those issues before. So it wasn't a utopia. That's one stereotype. The other stereotype is that they were just complete barbaric savages. So
Mhm.
you have the romanticized, and then you have the savage, and even the really neat combined one is the noble savage. So you have, like, you're kind of combining those two, but then you have just the barbaric savage, that they were just killing and scalping and
Mhm.
doing all of these abuses to one another prior to European contact. And so it was a complete disaster, and the whites came in to save that, and to civilize and all. So those are the two extremes in terms of stereotypes, and then there's a lot of sub stereotypes that land in there. One of the stereotypes is dress. So our regalia, we don't call it costume. So if you ever go to a powwow, which is something that people are welcome to do, most powwows are public, where we have our powwow dances. It's an intertribal event, so multiple tribes and regions that are represented, but a lot of them will wear traditional regalia. And one of the things that, most people think of the buckskins and the headdresses and all, and you really won't see that at a powwow. You will see certain headdresses, but they are designed uniquely for that tribe or the
Mm,
region that they are of and that they're representing. So with Choctaws, we didn't wear like the war bonnets, like what people think of the eagle
yeah,
feathers, and that was primarily Plains Indians and Comanche and all. So Choctaws, we had a unique, distinct dress that we did. So really with regalia, that's something for authors in terms of stereotype to be very aware of if you're writing historical, or if you're writing contemporary. I know one storyteller, he would go into schools and he's like, well, how do Choctaws dress? And different kids were like, oh, this and that, buckskins and all. And he's like, no, how do Choctaws dress? And he indicated himself. And so it's just, continuing to have that awareness. But yeah, that's one of them. I also have a free ebook that your listeners might be interested in. It's called Five Stereotypes to Avoid
oh,
When
fun.
Writing about
Oh,
Native Americans.
sorry.
No, you're good. So it's five stereotypes to avoid when writing about Native Americans, and it's at fictioncourses.com/stereotypes. And it's a short ebook, but it's meaty, and it gives you the stereotype, and then it gives you a solution, some things that you can do to avoid that stereotype. So your authors are welcome to go download a free copy of that.
That's fantastic. I just uh, the topic is very interesting to me, and I know it's been I feel like a little bit brought back into the media with it was a movie or series. I haven't seen it yet on Apple with Leonardo DiCaprio. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Is it Killers of the Flower Moon?
Yes, yes.
Yes, that was a movie, a long movie. I have not seen the whole thing yet, but I have read the book.
And is it well done, you think?
I
The
do.
book.
So the book, I know that he worked within the Osage tribe. He went to the tribe himself, and he's a really wonderful example. And I have a couple of others, but he's a great example of becoming a trusted author. So you've
Mm,
become trusted by the tribe. And I have another author friend, Dr. William Meadows, who's done a great deal of work among the Kiowa, and then now with the Choctaws and several tribes, to where I think in the Kiowas he was actually like unofficially adopted into their veteran society. And he's like, I'm not a veteran and I'm not Kiowa. And they're like, we don't care. You've done so much to honor our veterans and our people that we want you to be a part of our society. So there are definitely ways that you can build those relationships and become a trusted author. So with Killers of the Flower Moon, the book, as far as I know, the Osage were greatly involved in that. I always read author notes, and I always
mhm,
read the backstory of the
mhm.
book within the book to see, did the author go to the tribe? Did he, or she, how did they approach their research? And that's really good insight to how you can do it as an author. So, as far as I know, he did a really great job on the book. With the movie, they also worked intensely with the tribe. They made some changes, I
Mhm.
know, to better represent the tribe based on their feedback. And at this point, it's kind of a mix. As far as reviews, I don't think any of them don't appreciate it. They want to tell more of their story and tell it
Yeah,
from their perspective, which is understandable. And I see
yeah.
them doing that someday, of really focusing on just the Osage story. The thing with that, and in terms of marketing, and I know you talk a great deal about marketing, whenever you have just the native characters, or like that's what you're focused on, the native story, you have to look at relatability with your
Yeah,
readers. So you need
right.
to make sure that you're bringing in other elements like family, or things that everyone can relate to. So, and that is why I know, for commercial reasons as well, like I said, they have, the big name actors and
Yeah.
all that. They really wanted to work toward it having commercial success, which with commercial success comes more awareness of the
Yeah.
native story. So we
Yeah.
had that with Wind Talkers, and it's very debated as well. And I don't believe that they worked with the Navajo or the Dene people as much as they would have or could have done. So yeah, there's the commercial element, and it does get the native story out there, but you want to just balance that whenever you're deciding how you're going to tell the story.
Have you read or seen The Last of the Mohicans?
So the book originally, the James Fenimore Cooper, yes,
Mhm.
I read it way back in the day, but I never saw the movie. And I believe they had a non-native main actor in
Daniel
that. That was
Day-Lewis, yeah, and it was interesting. The movie is significantly different from the book in some ways.
okay.
It ends differently. They swap the sisters' characters in the book. Like
Oh,
it's
okay.
really interesting some of
Okay.
the changes that they made, and I'm sure again to make it more Hollywood, more like appealing for people to come in. But I saw that I read the book in high school and I watched the movie, and I just remember I didn't have a lot of exposure to the Native American stories or things before that point in time, and I just cried so hard. But it
Yeah.
made me. It's what I love. What they did about it was. I think, and this is writing across the board. I'm getting emotional here, but with
Mhm.
writing across the board, oh gosh, we want to
Okay.
feel something, and seeing the complexity of relationships and how, I mean, in this story, there was just this complexity between the Native Americans and I mean, they'd taken these girls hostage and were marching them across North Carolina, basically across the mountains. But you see like how people interact and like how I don't know, it was really beautiful seeing that. And then of course in I mean there's just been other situations, but I think the importance is especially in this country we don't have a very long history, so we should know
Mhm.
our history really well.
Oh
And I
my.
feel like we don't know our history on that piece of it. It gets kind of skirted over. Oh yeah, and I think part of that is guilt, right? I mean, what happened to the people through the Trail of Tears, it's awful, and nobody wants to nobody wants
Mhm.
to see sad things, right? So it's easier to just move on. But it's such a fascinating topic to me, I'm just so glad that you were able to come in here and shed some light on this and help people that want to tell stories about this topic tell it in a better way.
Mhm.
um this
Wow.
is a question, if you don't want to answer, I can edit out of the thing, but I'm curious about Thanksgiving.
Mm.
In the last few years, I've seen so much stuff and people saying like you can't be really sensitive to other people and still celebrate Thanksgiving, etc. But I have an uncle, and this is where I am guilty of not knowing my stuff too. My aunt married a full-blooded Native American in Reno, and he actually lives mostly on the reservation, comes home for the weekends. He lives and works on the reservation. So my cousins are 50-50, and I don't even know what tribe they come from. Like I should know these things. But he celebrates Thanksgiving, and he was like, I have no problem with it. Like it's become an American tradition. It's something fun that we do. And he was like, but I'm sure what's your perspective?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Oh gosh, there's so much I could say on that. So I will say, playing off on like the Chickasaw Nation, and I've done writing with them. My newest book was through Chickasaw Press. They are very much about our shared history. And so
Mm,
going back to what you were saying is we don't know our history. I mean, it's like I said,
yeah.
America hasn't been around that long. Like
Yeah.
as far as a nation, why don't we know these things in our history? And So what I love about what the Chickasaws are doing is they're literally calling it our shared history. And they're going
Mm,
through American history and saying, okay, here's where the Chickasaws were in American
mm.
history. Here's how Chickasaws helped build the United States of America,
Oh,
in
yay.
a sense. And like the Choctaws, we never were at war with the United States. We
Hmm.
fought alongside from starting with the Revolutionary War all the way
Mm.
through to today's conflicts. We
Oh, my
have had
goodness.
Choctaw warriors. And my ancestors go back to that. And I wrote a book on the Choctaw Code Talkers of World War One because so few know
Oh,
about that there were
yes.
code
Oh my
talkers
God.
in the
I'm
First World
glad you
War.
brought that up.
And
Because that's so fascinating. The code talkers. I've got to add that link to the book in your notes because
yeah, because most know about World War II. So we're just really proud to share about, and it wasn't just the Choctaws, but other tribes who were in World War One, more doing incidental code talking and using their language during combat. So, we have that very strong shared history, and that's a way that we don't want to ignore the
yeah,
traumas and the injustices of the
yeah.
past, but there is also a lot of good stories and hope and faith that really brought our people together. And I love what you said about integrated, and that's really more what a lot of the, not a lot of them, but that was the attempt with
Hmm.
some of the communities and all, was more to integrate versus just let's assimilate these indigenous people and absorb their culture and just kill the Indian, save the man kind
Yeah.
of philosophy. So going to your question on Thanksgiving, yes, there are many natives who are opposed to it. I see those memes really coming around a lot more when Thanksgiving rolls around. A lot of that, again, it's not always the younger generation, but it is a lot of the younger because, like I
Yeah.
said, the elders, that is how they grew up. They grew up in the American culture. They grew
Right.
up. They are Americans, and that's why again, the Chickasaw Nation and others have really adopted the term First American. We were
Yeah.
just the first Americans here, and that so American history is our history. It's Indigenous history too. So I'll just say the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma has a Thanksgiving dinner at every single senior community center throughout the month of November. So
Oh,
they serve
wow.
a free Thanksgiving dinner to all of the elders in our 10 districts that we have in the Choctaw Nation. So very much strong supporters and advocates. And I appreciate what Governor Anna Tubby, usually of the Chickasaw Nation, releases a statement each year around Thanksgiving, and just talking about our strong history
Yeah.
with the United States, and that it is really a time of just giving thanks and showing gratitude. So and again, a part of our American history, and as far as the natives who are a part of the Thanksgiving tradition and the stories, I think it's good to tell the accurate story and tell the accurate narrative. But again, things that are written in the 20th and 21st century needs to be balanced with historical accounts and really looking at what is
Yeah.
the real history, and that
Yeah.
seems to be changing often. So we
Yeah.
need to be very cautious about jumping on, okay, this is the history and this is how it really happened, and in a decade or so from now, we may find evidence that it changed. So really approaching it with humility and with knowing that we weren't there, and we're putting 21st century perspectives and experiences
Right.
on people in a completely different time period and perspective and experiences. So yeah, that's very very short on Thanksgiving, but I appreciate you asking that. It's nothing wrong with
Well,
that.
because the reality is like I'd be really sad if you said you shouldn't use the word Thanksgiving and you shouldn't celebrate it because
Mm,
it's one of my favorite holidays, but I
mine
don't
too.
I don't even think about to be honest and maybe a little sad about this, like I no longer even think about the origination of it. I just
Mm.
think about it's a wonderful time where we give gratitude, we give thanks for what we have, we celebrate together, and we watch football and eat a lot of food. So,
And pecan pie and pumpkin pie. I
yes,
mean, it's a
exactly.
it's a big family holiday for us for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, and so it's not that I don't want to have I very much wish that we could remember and speak accurately about, them. I think it's important to remember that it was the first meal celebrated or that's the story, right? That's the beautiful story, a story of coming together and working together. And I like to think of it that way. But I think there's a lot of history that could be, a lot of education around it that could be done. So I'm kind of hoping that if nothing else comes from this interview, we'll have some authors who become inspired to write more about the first Americans. And I think it'd just be fascinating to dig into some of these topics and look at our history and how do we do better if we don't really own the past. And it's sad to me. I think this is totally going on a different thing here, but as we get more technology and as we get more advanced and as our world becomes so busy and so 2020s, I guess, like I feel like we're losing so many. And a little bit of this also has to do with all of the political correctness and the cancel culture and all of this type of stuff, because I don't feel like people feel comfortable having conversations and talking about things because we become very afraid of saying the wrong thing and then being, completely taken down for that, or looking like we're disrespectful or anything like that. And I think that's a shame, because it shuts down conversation instead of encouraging conversation. So I really appreciate the fact that you reached out and said this was a topic that you'd like to talk about, and appear to be very open and encouraging of people that aren't First Americans to write about First Americans, but just making sure we're doing it in the right way.
Yeah. And that's the thing, Alexis, what you're saying. I debated for many years about tackling this project, this topic so publicly. I taught it at a few writing conferences. People was starting to ask me to speak on it, and I did. I was like, oh, sure, I can do that. And my mother, bless her, she was really encouraging me to create a course and really get this message out there. And I'm like, oh, this is not going to be an easy road, because it is very controversial. It is very hotly debated, and there are not easy answers. There usually aren't even simple answers. There's not something that can just be answered in a few words. You have to go deep on these subjects. And what I like to tell authors is I am open to having these conversations. I'm not easily offended. So I'm not that sensitivity where it's like, oh, can I ask this? I'm a good place to ask questions that you might be concerned about offending someone else, if you ask them, especially if you don't know them. So I really want to be that source for writers, because I've been in both worlds. I've been the with the American Indian history, and especially Choctaw history. I've written 2 books on the Choctaw Trail of Tears. So I have gone into some of the hardest parts of our history and really tried to bring the hope and the light and the reconciliation out in that, while, not in any way, sugarcoating, what our people went through. And then on the other side, I've been just that writer who wants to write about things that I'm not. And how do I do that in a good way? So I've been in both perspectives, and I know most writers have really good hearts and they want to do it right. And those are the writers that I'm really speaking to.
Well, so first of all, to remind everyone, she does have a course, and you can find the course on the website. And I'll have her give the website. I'll have Sarah give the website in just a second. Again, it'll also be in the show notes. But you mentioned that you also have a coupon code that you would like to share. Is that still the case?
I did. Absolutely. I will create it. It's your acronyms are what are your acronyms again for your women in publishing? Is it WIP? WIP. So we'll say WIP.
Okay.
FWAI.
WIPFWAI. Okay. I'm going to do that in military talk in case people couldn't understand, because I know sometimes the P's, T's, all those things. Okay, so it's Whiskey, Indigo, Papa, Foxtrot, Whiskey, Alpha, Indigo. So
I love that. That's the first time I've had someone break it like that. That's awesome.
Well, I'm a veteran. I'm a military veteran myself. So,
Yes.
sometimes that just works really well when you're, because I mean, they sound so similar, S and F and P and T, and not, maybe not T and P and T, but it's like, wait, what'd she say? So,
Yeah. And thank you for your service,
oh,
Alexa.
thank you.
I love our warriors of our country.
Yes, and because of that, when you started, that's why I got so excited when you started talking about the code breakers, because not only was I in the military, I was in intel. So I did intelligence, and I didn't do any code breaking, but I was in signals intelligence and things like which is the
It was actually
new
code
kind of
talk.
code
Yeah, it was
talking,
actually
code
code
talking.
talking.
Yes,
Yeah. Hmm.
that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Code, but anything like that, anything that's
Yes.
like helps people get information and transmit information in a secret and interesting way, I'm just completely fascinated by. And so that is your course is fictioncourses.com/American Indians, correct?
Correct. That's it.
Okay. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for having a very just open conversation and allowing me to ask some of the questions that I've been interested in. And I thought this was a lovely
Yeah.
conversation.
Oh, I really appreciate you having me on, Alexa. I think we covered some really good ground. Thank you for that.
I agree. All right, everyone, please make sure you go over to fictioncourses.com/American Indians. Use the code WIPFWAI for for what discount are you giving?
$50 off. $50 off the
$50
case.
discount. Nice. And you can also go to ChoctawSpirit.com. Is that still up and running?
That is, and
Yes.
that's where you'll find all of my books and also my mother's jewelry and fine art photography. It's our
Oh,
art site.
lovely. Okay. Well, again, all these links will be over womeninpublishingsummit.com/podcast. Look for this episode with Sarah Elizabeth, and we will, yeah, put all of this there. Go ahead.
Hmm. I appreciate that. I was just going to say, as we close out here, that we don't have a word for goodbye in Choctaw. We say Chipisa la Chiki. I will see you again soon.
Okay. Say that again slower.
Chipisa
Chipisa
la
la
Chiki.
Chiqui. Chipisa la Chiqui. I love
Oh,
that.
perfect. Well
I love that.
done.
Hey, now I speak another language. Although I'll probably have forgotten that in like 2 seconds. I'm going to go back and write it down.
If you say Oklahoma, you've spoken in Choctaw. Those are two combined Choctaw words, meaning
Oh,
Okla meaning people or tribe roughly, and Homa meaning red. So land of the red people, the state of Oklahoma. So you've been speaking Choctaw probably all your
my whole
life.
life. Wow, that's so cool. Well, thank you so much.
Uh,
This was really way better than I anticipated. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alexa. I appreciate you having me on. Yakoki, thank you.
You don't have to give me your heart. You don't have to give it away.
Thank you for joining us on the podcast. We hope to see you back for the next episode. Great, huge thanks goes to Jasmine Commerce for the use of her song. You can find Jasmine on SoundCloud. Go check out all of her music. We'll see you next time.